Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today we are taking a journey and we are going to let our photography roadmap guide us. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast, a weekly podcast for those who believe that moments matter most and that a beautiful photo is more than just a sum of its settings. A show for those who want to do more with the gear they have to take better photos today. And now, your host, Raymond Hatfield.
Welcome back to this episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. I am your host, Raymond Hatfield. As always, I'm excited to be here today. We have so much going on. This has been a big week for me. Hopefully it's been a big week for you. You know, for the podcast, there are many new premium members to the podcast as well. So I have some fun and exciting news. The past few weeks, you heard me talk about changes coming to the premium membership. And this is them, right? So starting today, I'm introducing some new options to the premium membership. So these new options are geared towards those just for helping you for exactly where you're at in your photography, in your business. So first, there's the first option for the premium membership is called the Bpp Starter Option, right? Beginner Photography Podcast Starter Option. This is for those of you who, want to start to dip your toes into the waters of earning money with your camera. And with that, you will get the premium podcast interviews each and every single week. Now, next is for those who are ready to do a little bit more, to put in a little more legwork and elbow grease into building their business. And that is the Beginner Photography Podcast Builder option, where you will get not only the weekly premium podcasts, but also access to the supportive premium members only group and monthly business training video workshops. So that's a huge bonus right there. Next, the third option here is called the Beginner Photography Podcast Grower option, which is for those who, they've started the business, they're starting to put all the pieces into place, but now they're ready for it to grow, to take off, to really put the rubber to the road, as they say. And that is everything before, right? The weekly podcast interviews, the access to the Facebook group, the premium members only Facebook group, all of the monthly business training workshops, but also a group coaching calls on through Zoom. So we all get together, we chat about kind of the issues that we're having, and you can get some more personalized help with that and get more of a direct path, I suppose. And then lastly, the last option here is called the Beginner Photography Podcast Thriver, which includes one-on-one coaching with me just to give you more of a exact roadmap for exactly where you want to go in photography and help keep you on track. So again, as you can see, full range of options to help those of you who want to grow your photography business no matter where you are at. So if you want to learn more about becoming a premium member, you can head to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and click the premium membership button at the top of the page. But today we are here to talk about our photography roadmap, right? We're taking a step back from the business side of things. You might have just purchased your camera and the idea of a business is just so far in the future that you're not even there yet. So that is what this episode is geared towards today, right? Taking this photography roadmap, which is the route in which you take to learn photography. Now, I know that there are many different avenues in photography. There's many different genres, and even within that, there are different ways to learn and practice your photography. But the thing is that, often we just get very excited and we want to learn everything so fast that we can become overwhelmed and then we just give up. And I don't want that to be you. You got into photography to share stories and to capture memories. And that's important. That is important, and I don't want you to get derailed because you were so overwhelmed by the idea of step 18 when you are only on step 3. So, as I said, there's a lot of different journeys in photography, but what we're going to be talking about today, while it's still a journey, this is a journey that is not a time trial. This is just a journey of milestones, and it's how you get to understand working with your camera, and controlling light, right? So it's the fundamentals of photography. This is the photography roadmap for learning the fundamentals of photography, because in photography, there are honestly a lot of small moving pieces, and it can be hard to know exactly what to focus on for growth. So, before we begin and start plotting our course, what we need to do is know where it is that we want to go. So traditionally, I guess, you wouldn't just pack up bags and not know where you're going if you were going on a trip, right? Because then you might end up with, swim trunks when you're going hiking for Everest, So knowing where it is that you want to go lets you better prepare to get there. So this is where you would just simply ask yourself questions like, what does success look like to you? What would the end look like? What would this thing look like when I'm done? Who is your audience? So obviously shooting and photography is a creative outlet for many of you. So your answers here to this question of what does success look like, and what that means is, what does it look like with you with a camera in your hand when you are proficient, right? So it's going to look different for somebody who is using photography simply as a creative outlet versus somebody who, from the beginning knows that they want to start and grow a thriving photography business. So the first step here that we need to do is we just need to take a few minutes and think about where you want your camera to take you. All right, so, again, for me, being a wedding photographer, I want to be able to, this is where I would list maybe some potential areas where I know that it might be difficult, according to my skill set. So when I first got started, I want to know how to shoot in a reception and not have to worry about not having enough light, right? I want to be able to take beautiful portraits without having to do a ton of Photoshop and things like that. So ask yourself, where do you want your camera to take you? Now, for the most part, the journey into photography, it's going to start about the same way for just about everybody. And whether that is, you start, as a kid with a camera in your hand, quote unquote, or you have a child and you think, oh, I better start, documenting these moments and milestones that they're going to be going through. Maybe you have a big trip coming up, maybe overseas, or you just want photography to be your creative outlet and nothing more than that, right? But again, it all starts in this exact same way, which is at some point we acquire a camera. Very rarely do I find that people do research on cameras before they actually buy one. And maybe I don't just mean like the camera itself, but more so how to use the camera. What we do instead as humans is we look at the end result that the camera can produce, right? So we ask people for photos that they've taken with the camera, or photos that they've taken with a lens that we want to get. And then based on what we think their photos look like, we'll determine whether or not this is the right camera for us, which, if we know anything about photography, is just a terrible metric to determine how good a camera is or is not. So what we do is that we get this camera, right? We saw somebody online, they have the camera that we think that we want. They posted some photos. We thought that it looked great. Maybe it had wonderful light or a wonderful moment, and we think that is the camera for me. And then we buy it. We have this camera, and now you take it out into the world, and guess what? It is just simply not taking the photos that you imagined that it would. You thought that all the photos would be bright and airy and have, good focus and an out of focus background and just a wonderful moment. And that's just not the case. All of these photos that you're taking look like snapshots. And the reason why that is that there's a good chance that you're probably just shooting in auto right now. So this is where officially I would say step one starts, because this is where the path splits for many. For many people, just having the camera and just taking snapshots is more than fine for them. That's exactly what they wanted. They just wanted something that, looked cool, felt cool, had a good telephoto zoom range maybe. They were going to take some pictures of wildlife or whatever, and that is fine. They will let the camera make all of the decisions. But there's another subset of people who at that moment, when they're not happy with their photos, they say to themselves, oh, I need to figure this thing out. This is not working the way that I wanted it to. So step one is getting out of auto. So again, even here, there are multiple ways to go. So if you are the type of person who just likes to dip your toes in the water, if you're that kind of a person, then you can start with something with a shooting mode called Aperture Priority. So this is different. The name of it is a little bit different on Canon, Nikon, Fuji, Sony, whatever it is. But if you are the kind of person who likes to just rip off the Band-Aid, then I suggest going full manual as soon as you can. And that is because shooting manual just gives you full control of your image, how it looks, how it turns out, and just gives you the most amount of flexibility even after the fact. So the three settings that we use to control manual are what we use to control exposure. Now, exposure is just how much light is in a photo, how well it is exposed to light. So we use three things to control our exposure, and that is aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Now, all three of these actually are used in conjunction with each other to get a photo. So aperture it's actually the opening in your lens that allows the amount of light to come through. Maybe you're familiar with looking at a lens, and especially in the film days, there's a dial on the front of the lens, the aperture ring, and when you stop down, it closes, and the hole within the lens gets smaller and smaller, restricting the amount of light that can pass through. And number two was shutter speed, which is just how long your piece of film or your digital sensor is exposed to light, and ISO is how sensitive your camera sensor is to the light that is coming in. So one way that I suggest going out and practicing these things is by simply, it's really easy. It's really easy. The practice is the best way I have found to learn something. I don't know about you, but I can read something until I am blue in the face. I can watch YouTube videos until the cows come home. But if I don't do it myself, it's not going to stick. So I love to come up with little practice exercises just to get my brain to wrap around the idea of how all three of these things work together. And I want you to know that right off the bat, you're not going to be taking like masterpieces when shooting manual. Simply shooting manual does not make the photo better or worse. It just gives you full control. So it's kind of a mirror as to what it is that you need to work on, I suppose. Think of it that way. So if you get a photo that you're not happy with, it's not the camera, you're just kind of maybe missing something in the equation. So to just simply get started and taking your first photos in manual, the best way that I have found to practice or to recommend others to go out and practice is by going outside at different times of the day and taking the exact same photo, same tree, same car, same house, whatever it is, multiple times a day. So about 3 times a day, early, morning, afternoon, and then the evening, just to see how the light has changed and how you have to compensate with your settings to be able to capture a properly exposed image. So that is how, if you are ready to just like dive in head first, you really want to get photography going, that's the way to do it. That's going to be the best way to do it. And then again, just know that you're going to be frustrated and that there's going to be 10,000 photos that you're not happy with. But once you understand it, it's like riding a bike. But earlier when I said, if you're the kind of person who likes to just dip your toes in the water and just slowly ease your way into it, then Aperture Priority is the mode for you. This is something that many photographers who later on to go shoot manual start with, because it just gives you a lot more control and creative control for your image as well. So what Aperture Priority is, remember I told you what aperture is, and that is the opening of the hole within your lens, how big of an opening, how much light is allowed to enter. And it affects more than just the light coming in, but it also affects how out of focus your background is. So oftentimes you can look at a scene that's happening in front of you and think to yourself, well, I want this person in focus, but I want the background completely out of focus. So to do that, I know that I want an aperture of about f2.8. So in Aperture Priority, you would set your aperture to f2.8, and then your camera would come up with the shutter speed value and the ISO value as well. So then you don't have to really think about anything. It's like more of just a creative version of auto mode. But just knowing, when you're changing your settings about, what aperture you might need to get more in focus or less in focus really does help solidify how things work when it comes time to, go full manual, I suppose. If you already have an understanding of how 33% of how exposure works, you're going to be able to figure out the other 66% a little bit easier. So that's what Aperture Priority is. And to tell you the truth, even though when I go to weddings, I shoot full manual all day, every day, when I'm just shooting kind of personal work here at home or just like photos of the kids, or we're going out, maybe we're going to, not lately, but I guess, a few weeks ago, I guess last week, we went out on like a little hike at a local state park. And I just threw the camera in Aperture Priority mode because I wanted to spend less time thinking about the camera. Not that it takes a lot of time, but I just wanted to focus more on my family and my kids and having a good time with them. So therefore, I put the camera in Aperture Priority mode, knew that I wanted to shoot at f2, and then let the camera deal with the rest of the settings. And I got photos that I was happy with. There's a little bit of inconsistency between some of the photos, but to me, it was worth it. It was worth the price because then I didn't have to take every moment to perfect every single photo. So that is that, right? So with those three settings, aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, that is how you control your exposure. Now exposure, again, arguably one of the most important aspects of photography because it is how bright or how dark a photo is. So if you can get it just right, now you can start working on everything else. So kind of step 2 here would be to learn about kind of the extras. So in this case, I would suggest next working on and learning white balance. So maybe you've heard the term before, maybe you haven't. White balance is telling your camera what color white is. So if that doesn't make any sense to you, no worries, it didn't make sense to me either when I first got started. But essentially what it means is that light comes in different colors. That's why we have color, essentially, is that light is bent in a certain way or is reflected in a certain way, that one entire wavelength is soaked up by whatever the subject is, and that is how we see color. Well, light, like white light, is exactly the same. There's no there's no just like white. Light isn't just, well, here's light. There are different shades of light. So in the daytime, when you go outside, light is typically a little more blue. So what we have to do is we actually have to warm it up a little bit so that it looks more natural to our eyes. Now this is something that, if you are not used to having a camera in your hand or taking photos, might not make sense because we as humans have a very wide range of colors that we can see with our own eyes that we don't even notice when the color of light changes unless we're looking at two different light sources side by side. So maybe you can think of replacing a light bulb and looking at it and think, wow, that one's a little more blue than the rest of them, or wow, that one's a little more orange than the other ones, and that is white balance right there. Those are two different colors of quote unquote white light. And that's something that you wouldn't even notice. If all of the light bulbs were the same color, if they were orange or if they were more blue, you would think that they were just white because our eyes are good like that. But it's not until you go to take a photo that the camera really tells you, no, you're not getting off that easy. These are different colors of white. So again, when we tell the camera what is white, then that means that all the other colors within our scene will just be much more accurate. So if you have ever taken a photo and it was too blue, then it means that you are using a tungsten or like an indoor light white balance, but you were shooting outdoors. Or the exact opposite. If you had ever taken a photo and it was really orange, it was because you were taking a daytime white balance and then shooting indoors. So if this doesn't make sense, I understand, I get it. Just know that, you know, maybe you're not here yet, and that's where you're gonna get to next. I don't recommend, unless you're still learning the exposure, to shoot in auto white balance. I don't recommend anybody shooting in auto white balance because once again, having more control of your camera means that you can see the scene in front of you with much more clarity. And that also means looking at the light and asking yourself, well, what kind of light is this? If you're outdoors, well, it's going to be sunlight. If it's shady, well, it's going to be shade. If you're indoors, it's either going to be tungsten or it's going to be fluorescent, and that's about it. You know, it's really not that difficult, but just ask yourself, well, what's the main light source here? And then on your camera, there's preset values to sun, clouds, shade, tungsten, fluorescent, and then full manual. But I never shoot in full manual when it comes to the white balance as well. So again, I just use those set modes, and I've never had a problem. Never had a problem. But again, the purpose of this is to simply tell the camera what is accurately white. Now, sometimes you can kind of trick the camera and use white balance in a creative sense. So remember how earlier I mentioned that if you are using a tungsten white balance, but you're outdoors, your photo is going to be really, really blue. Well, one thing that I like to do is actually do this at like nighttime, dusk time, where there's other lights outside, illuminating things, whether it be street lights or whatever it is. And then I do this at weddings, I use a flash to actually illuminate my subjects, because my flash is going to be the proper color, the proper light white balance color for tungsten. So therefore, my subjects, are going to have accurate colors, but everything around them is going to be more of a deep blue. It's kind of dreamy. It looks very cool to look at. So, again, this is kind of where you start to get creative. So once you know exposure and once you know your white balance, you've pretty much got everything taken care of on the image side of things, strictly from a technical standpoint. So then this is where you can kind of branch out a little bit and get a little bit more creative with what it is that you are shooting. And at this point, I recommend starting to shoot silhouettes, starting to shoot shadows, starting to shoot, maybe abstract things that you wouldn't normally shoot, because now you have a little bit more technical ability to be able to figure out how to do those things. When it comes to a silhouette, you can't just be outside and shoot a silhouette. Whatever your subject is has to be much more underexposed than whatever the background is. So I like to use the example of like somebody being in a doorway, right? If you're inside of a house, excuse me, and you are looking, and somebody's standing in the doorway, they are going to be dark. They're going to be like in a shadow compared to everything that is happening outside of the door or the window or something like that. So in that sense, they're not being lit from where you are. And then their background is much brighter than they are. So therefore, they are going to be a shadowy figure. They're going to be a silhouette. Have a little drink of water there. Whew, getting excited about this. And again, this is kind of the stage at which you are still getting acquainted with the tool in your hand. So don't expect to be capturing masterpieces, because you need to learn what the tool does first and how to use it. So I cannot stress enough how much you just need to go out there and just shoot for the sake of shooting. Don't shoot with, shoot with intention, but don't shoot with the mentality of that, like every photo is going to be, a banger, and we're going to bring it home and it's just going to be masterpieces all day long. Just go out there and just be creative and just let whatever happens. And if it's not good, well, then that's okay, because you should just ask yourself, what is not good about this photo? And then going forward, you can work on that. You can tweak that. But at this stage, I only want you to judge your photos based on one thing, and that is the exposure. If the photo is too bright or too dark, because then you know if your photo is too bright or too dark, then you still got some work to do to be able to fully understand how the camera works and how to change it so that now you can start consistently taking photos with a good exposure, because ultimately that's all that we have to work with right now. When we start to load too much on our plate, it's just going to be a mess. So even within exposure, whether something is too bright or too dark, I like to think of the Goldilocks example here. You can have 3 photos, and one is too bright, one is too dark, and one is just right. But somebody might like the photo that's a little bit too dark, or somebody might like the photo that's a little bit too bright, bright and airy. So there is some sort of range in there. It can be kind of subjective, but even within that, nobody likes oatmeal or porridge or whatever that is frozen solid, and nobody likes oatmeal that is burn your mouth like lava hot. So there's still some room to play for you to decide whether you like it a little bit brighter or a little bit darker, but just don't go too far with it. Don't go too far. All right. I'll take another drink of water here. Okay, so after you have worked and got yourself a good grasp on exposure, the next thing to work on here is your focus. How and where your camera focuses just has a dramatic effect on the final image. Maybe you've taken a photo where, it was of a child and the tree in the background was in focus and the child was not. Even if they have a great smile and even if the lighting was great, the photo's still useless, right? Photos, you can't do anything with it. So that is where focus has a dramatic effect on your final image. Now, your camera has an array of focus points. So most entry-level cameras have, honestly, I'm not 100% sure, somewhere between 15 and maybe 30 focus points. Now, the center focus point, you know what these focus points are when you half press the shutter button and you see them like flash red or flash white, depending on what camera system you use. Maybe yellow, or Nikon, or I'm sorry, with Fuji it's green, just to let you know, hey, this is the point that's going to be in focus here. The one that is going to be in the middle is going to be just your strongest and your fastest autofocus point. So to figure out how to change autofocus points, I just recommend you check out your camera's manual, as every camera is totally different. Even within, Canon this and Canon that, it can be different. So just read your camera's manual and learn how to choose the center focus point for you. Because after you have spent time learning on how to get the correct focus, then just all of your photos, just keep your focus point just right in the center, and then just work on getting the best, just making sure that all of your photos are in focus, and now you have a good exposure, right? So now your photos have a good exposure, a good white balance, and they're in focus. I mean, what more can you ask for? Like, this is getting to be great. This is getting to be great right here. Now you know that you can take an image in pretty much any situation and have a photo that turns out that is somewhat pleasing. But once you have figured out, focus, and you get down that center autofocus point, maybe you can play around with the other focusing modes, but I wouldn't, try to go too quick, because focus is it's kind of a wild west how cameras determine what should be in focus, what shouldn't be in focus. I mean, even within Fuji, it's like they have face tracking, but also eye tracking, and it could be either the left or the right eye. So there's just a lot of room for a potential error, I would say. So I wouldn't worry about any other focus mode. Just focus on the single shot, single center autofocus point. Now, once, again, you have spent time learning how to use your camera, now we can work on composition. And composition is how you compose your photo, right? Up until this point, we've been working only on the tool itself and how to get something acceptable. But now is when we can kind of branch out and start to flex our creative muscles. And I was going to say flex those wings, those creative wings. Is that the right term? There's something about wings and flexing them, and something about like a bird or something. But anyway, we're at this point to where now we can use the tool that we have and use it in a way that can help us tell maybe a better story, right? With the technicals, the exposure, the aperture, the ISO, the white balance, all these things, once you learn them, I'm telling you, it's like riding a bike. So while it feels really hard right now, just know that once you get it, you're good, and you're going to know it forever. So just keep chugging along, keep working on those things. With composition, though, it is something that you will always be working on, and that is simply because, once again, this is very subjective. There's many different compositions, and there's no right or wrong way, a reason why you would use one composition over another. So again, I don't want to get you overwhelmed here, but just know that this is where the fun happens, because this is the artistic side of things. This is where you can express yourself and tell the story that it is that you want to tell. So again, composition is how you compose your image, how you frame your camera. So some simple compositions here are centered. And you know this because this is what you've been working on by keeping your autofocus point right in the center of the frame. Every photo that you're taking now, whatever your subject is right in the middle of a frame. It looks like you are studying under Wes Anderson here because you're just nailing it, okay? But the next thing that I would recommend is something called leading lines. Now, leading lines are, every day we see things like a fence or a wall or, the side of a house or something like that. And if we look, because our cameras see things in 2 dimensions, not 3 like our own eyes. If we just close one eye and we just look simply at the shape of things, we can see geometric shapes. And wherever 2 shapes, intersect, or where one leads, that is a leading line. So, you can have somebody, I hate to use this example because it's not safe and I don't recommend this to anybody, but most beginners start off by taking photos on train tracks, okay? If you're listening to this right now, maybe you don't know, train tracks are very dangerous. Many photographers and their subjects are killed every year by being on train tracks, so please do not go on train tracks, okay? There are plenty of other places that you can use for leading lines, but I'm just using this for a mental example, okay? If somebody's standing in the middle of train tracks, again, don't do it, I don't recommend it. The railroad ties essentially go all the way back, and the lines that those railroad ties create in the frame as a geometric shape draw your eye to the face of your subject. Again, this is why new photographers want to go to these train tracks, because, well, it's just easy leading lines. Off to both sides are usually trees, and it looks, whatever. So that's leading lines. But once you actually start paying attention, there's a million other places where you can have leading lines. Blinds, the corner of a wall. I'm looking at a million places just here in my house that you could do, and you can do it too. But it takes more of an eye to start to kind of recognize and see. So start looking out for those leading lines. And once you find them, you're going to find that it draws your attention straight to your subject's eye every time, and that is just a pleasing composition. Next is called framing. So you can think of a window frame, right? If you're looking at a house and it has a window frame that's just a square, if somebody was in that window frame, or they were looking through the window frame, they're now being framed. So your eye is naturally going to want to go to that spot right there. We can look for things like an arch of tree branches, or actually for the email that I sent out for this episode right here, I actually share a photo. Now it's titled "Don't Forget to Pay Attention to Your Backgrounds," but there were some clouds in the sky, and there was a small break in between 2 clouds, where most of the photo is just white clouds, but the break between the 2 clouds is just a circle of kind of blue. And that, I put my son's face in that little blue area by the way that I composed the image, and now he was being framed by the clouds. So that's a frame right there. Again, look around for things that you can just naturally frame your subject, and your eye is going to go right to that spot. Now last here, easy composition, rule of thirds. Maybe you know this composition because on most cameras, by default, the composition right there, rule of thirds, is already enabled. Now if it's not enabled, then you can do that within your settings there. But if you're not looking on YouTube, or you're not, or it's not on your camera, think of overlaying a tic-tac-toe board onto the image of your like viewfinder. Now, wherever those lines intersect, those vertical and horizontal lines intersect, is where our eyes find naturally pleasing to put something there. Put your subject's face in that spot right there. Use that bottom line to frame out your horizon level. Anything like that you can use to create just a more interesting photo. So again, look into that. So we got centered composition, leading lines, framing, and rule of thirds. Again, composition just helps draw your viewer's attention where you want it to be, because photography is just a form of storytelling. That's all that it is. So what you include in your frame is just as important as what you frame out of your images. Okay. Now, after composition, this is something, again, like I said, it's going to take a long time to master, to get the hang of, to get going. But eventually you're going to get to the point to where you're pretty competent in being able to capture a photo that is well exposed, in focus, and has a pleasing composition. So what do you need to worry about next? And that is moment, the moment. Now, I am of the philosophy that moment matters most. Everything else in photography is simply used to complement the moment. Moments of joy, moments of wonder, moments of sorrow, moments of discovery. Your camera settings and your composition are to be used to highlight whatever the moment is here. So again, I told you I like little exercises. A little fun exercise for you is to photograph your TV. So the great thing about this is that, TV shows are typically shot by professionals, so you don't have to worry about exposure or composition at all. All that you have to worry about is waiting for the height of the moment. So get out your camera, point it at the TV, put on, Keeping Up with the Kardashians or some reality TV show that always just goes over the top when it comes to emotions, and then just wait for that right moment, right? Wait for the height of the moment, whether it be joy, wonder, sorrow, discovery, whatever the height of that moment is, wait and then take that photo. There's also a good practice because, you typically only have like 6 or 7 minutes between commercials, so it just gets you in there. You get ready to shoot. It's not like a marathon thing. Commercial comes on, cool, you can take a break. Commercial's over, you start over again. And again, just get into the practice of asking yourself when you're shooting, what is it that they're feeling right now? And do you think that this is going to be amplified? Whether it's the sorrow, joy, wonder, discovery, whatever it is, do you think that whatever they're feeling right now in that sense is going to be amplified? And if so, just wait another second before you take that photo. So after we've gotten to the point to where we're good with exposure, we're getting photos in focus, we have good compositions, and now we're getting photos with good moments, you've probably been posting your photos online for a while, and maybe you've even been asked to photograph others. So you're probably feeling excited, probably nervous, right? What if they don't like it? All these things. So many questions. What to offer, how much to charge, how do you deliver the photos? This is kind of a whole new realm of photography. Some of you may decide to go this path, some of you may not. But for those of you who do want to go down this path, I actually answer all of these questions I just made. It was released today, if you're listening to this September 1st, the day that it comes out, a 5-part YouTube video series called How to Make Money with Photography, Earn Your First $100 with Your Camera. Now, it's just simply the exact system that I use to build my business that covers everything from finding clients, what to post on Facebook, how to book them, and then I share some of my favorite poses for you to use as well, and then how to edit and deliver your images to make your first $100 in photography, step by step. Now, the link to those videos on YouTube are actually in the show notes. You can check that out right now. It also went out in the email for this episode if you're listening in September of 2020 here. But after getting your first clients, there is still a lot more that goes into running a sustainable long-term photography business that you can be proud of. There are actually 4 systems in place that you need to have in order to truly have a business and separate you from being just a weekend warrior. And those 4 systems are marketing, sales, production, and delivery. Now, hands down, the number one struggle that new photographers have when it comes to starting their photography business is how to get clients. Well, that in and of itself is marketing. So let me share with you some of my best marketing tips and talk about sales, production, and delivery.
You are listening to the free version of the Beginner Photography Podcast, where each week you learn how world-class photographers see and capture the world around them. If you want to hear the extended interview with their best business tips to learn how to make money with your camera, then become a premium member today by heading over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and click the premium membership button to join now.
So to this point, you have got a camera. You learned how to take proper exposure, right? Control your exposure, work on the color. You're now able to get photos in focus. You are using your composition in more of an artistic way to be able to capture an image in just an artistic way that your eye sees it. You've been asked to photograph family or friends. You've implemented the 4 systems for your photography business that it needs, and I even shared with you that bonus 5th system there. So what's next? Are you done? I mean, that seems pretty good. You learned photography, and now maybe you even have a few paying clients. Like, what's next? The answer is no. You're not done. You are not done. Let's go back to the basics for just a second. Let's think about the exposure that I was talking about, right? Aperture, ISO, shutter speed, all of those do one thing, and that is they control the amount of light coming into the camera. So let me ask you, what if you were in control of the light that came into your camera? Sounds pretty cool, right? The next stage here is learning how to use and manipulate light. Not just be reactionary to light, but use and manipulate light. So my favorite way to do this is with flash photography. So you can practice flash photography indoors. You know, you can even use it outdoors. This doesn't just have to be, oh, it's kind of dark in here, I want it to be a little bit brighter, let me just open up my flash. Flash is a very useful and creative tool that you can use to just level up or change the quality of your photography. So if you happen to have a flash, right, and I'm not talking about just the one that pops up on your camera. If you have an external flash, I have a practice for you. Go ahead and put the flash on your camera. Actually, I should have a flash right around here to just show you this if you're on YouTube. Okay, here we go, got it. So if you are, if you have a flash, take your flash, put it right on your camera, and as you can see, the head here like moves in different directions. It goes up, down, it can face your subject directly, it can bounce up towards the ceiling. This isn't just like just for design. This is to be more useful and to be able to get better light in your photos. So the exercise here is to simply, I did this with my son Charlie, right? I simply just put him about 4 feet off of a wall, right? And then I was maybe 5 feet in front of him. I put the flash on my camera. I had the head of the flash pointed straight up towards the ceiling. I took a picture. I had it pointed to the right and at the wall at a 90-degree angle, right? And then I took a picture. I had it at a 45-degree angle so that it was at the corner of the ceiling and the wall, and I took a picture. I had it pointed straight at him, and I took a picture. And then afterwards, I took all those pictures and I looked at them, and I simply asked myself, well, which one do I like most? Because you can notice that the quality of the light will change. When you flash a flash straight at somebody, it's going to be very harsh and it's going to hit them in the face, and it's not going to look very natural. When you can point it at a wall or a ceiling and you can bounce that light, effectively making a larger light source hit them, it's going to be soft light, it's going to be beautiful, they're going to look better. But it all depends on the style of photography that you want to do, because I do know photographers who just use the flash pointed straight at their subjects, and yet their photos still turn out great. So figuring out how it is that you can control the light in a way that you like is really going to be paramount here. Because again, when you are in control of the light, you are in full control of your image. And when we ask ourselves, I mean, isn't that exactly why we got into photography? Because we don't want the camera to capture what it wants to capture. I want to be in control. I want to let the camera know exactly what to shoot. So if you're in this stage right now, you know how to get an exposure, you know how to get your photos in focus, you know how to use composition in more of an artistic way, you've worked on moment and now you're getting those good moments. If you're at that stage and you're looking to get to that next level, it's 100% Flash. So I want you to check out my online course called Flash in a Flash. It's called Flash in a Flash because I teach you Flash in a Flash, real quick. And it is a complete starter course to getting started with Flash. I mean, I'm talking about like how to put batteries in your Flash, like that beginning, very, very starter. I show you how to use your Flash to increase the exposure, obviously, if you're gonna shoot in dark situations, but then we have some fun and I show you how to take the Flash off your camera and put it somewhere else, right? So I like to take my Flash and put it behind my couple to backlight them. Yeah, so again, this is where the real fun begins when it comes to Flash and photography. In fact, last week in the Beginner Photography Podcast listeners group, Tyrell posted his first shot that he took with Flash after going through the course. And well, I mean, I'll let you be the judge. It's phenomenal. It's full of emotion. It's properly exposed and yet moody and has just very beautiful colors. So Tyrell, man, if you're listening, congratulations. You did a fantastic job. Now, if you are interested in learning Flash, I actually have a special discount just for you if you're listening today, and that link is in the show notes for you to check out. But here's the thing that I love so much about Flash. And it, you know, aside from the fact that you are going to be in full control of your images, so many photographers completely write off using Flash. Completely write it off, thinking that either it's too complicated or that it's just simply that they like the look of natural light. But I mean, natural light is light. Natural light is light. So if you can control your light, now you can replicate natural light. And wouldn't you just love to be able to create beautiful, natural looking light anytime, anywhere? Learning Flash is such a huge opportunity for you to develop your unique style that, I mean, literally nobody will be able to replicate. So I really hope that today's talk showed you the journey, showed you the roadmap for learning photography. I would love to know where you are at in your journey, whether you're still trying to figure out exposure, whether you got exposure, but maybe you're just working on those moments now, getting better moments, or if you are ready for Flash, or even if you're in business. I would love to know where you are at in your journey of photography. Feel free to leave a comment in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. Let us know. Let's share. Where are we all at, and where do you need help the most? Because remember, this is a journey, and it's not a journey of a time trial. This is not a race. This is a journey. This is a journey of milestones. Milestones that you must hit to be able to get where it is that you want to go. So just keep shooting. Keep shooting. Keep being curious. And continue to audit your work as well. After every shoot, come home, look at your photos. Every photo that you like, ask yourself, why do you like it? Is it the moment? Is it the light? Is it the composition? What is it? Every photo that you don't like, ask yourself, why don't you like it? Is it the moment? Is it the light? Is it the composition? And then you are going to figure out very quickly what it is that you need to work on, or what it is that you can, just continue to use as your strength if you're really good at something. So keep shooting, keep being curious, and I want you to make do. I want you to make more. I want you to do more, and I really want you to make do with the gear that you got, because I promise you it is better than you think. That's it for today. Stay safe. Talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.